I'm about to take this insanely expensive vintage beer sign made out of cheap plastic and rebuild it to be bigger, brighter, and better. But this time out of walnut, backlit, and turned into art you'd actually want to hang in your living room. For as long as I can remember, I have been fascinated by Hamm's beer signs. When I was a kid, we would go to the spaghetti restaurant on the coast of Lake Erie, and I would just stare at the Hamm sign hanging above the entrance. It was backlit and looked as if water was moving through some sort of mechanical magic. And that has led us up to this point right here. And this video is brought to us by Squarespace. Recently, I was on eBay hoping to buy one to study and remake, but it turns out these signs are highly collectible and way out of my budget. Surprisingly though, I came across a listing for a version I had never seen before, and I instantly fell in love with it. It's got that classic mid-century modern style that I am just obsessed with, paired with a vintage outdoor photo advertisement that practically begs to be remade. Yeah, I was just as shocked as you to see this cheap plastic sign listed for $300. My plan is to pull all the dimensions from it, rebuild it bigger and better out of walnut, and insert my own custom photo and signage. Then I'll put the original back on eBay to recoup some of the costs. And to stay true to the vintage vibe, I'm going to take my own waterfall photo the hard way, on film, and develop it in my kitchen. I am also working towards my first gallery art show next year, and this piece is going to be one of the highlights. Like any good project, this one starts off with walnuts. These wide boys are left over from my modular coffee table project, and the walnut originally came from my friends at Handcrafted. They are not a sponsor of this video, but actual real world friends of mine, a family owned business right here in Toledo, Ohio, and they ship nationwide and are worth checking out. The first rule of working with walnut is to never cut down wide, clean, straight grain boards like you see here because they're hard to come by. But the thing is, I have a problem. I hold on to too many pieces of precious wood, waiting for the right project. I call this collecting potential. And when you start a new project every 2 weeks, these too good to use boards start to pile up. And as you can probably relate, I've got too much walnut and not enough space. I'm making my version much bigger, but I'm sticking with the original ratios between all the pieces. The roof has one thickness, the borders another, and the pillars their own. Almost every section has a different depth. Normally, when I design something from scratch, I try to limit the number of thicknesses and depths so the project feels cohesive. That idea actually goes back to my days in graphic design school. In a layout, you typically wouldn't use more than 2 fonts. Not a strict rule, but a good guideline to keep in mind. Of course, rules are meant to be broken, and in this case, all the different sizes and thicknesses work together beautifully, and that variety really adds to the visual appeal. I've got all the pieces cut. Some of them are cut to length. Some of them will be cut to length when I get to them because I'll need to cut them to fit. This guy right here is not going to be in the final piece. This is just going to be an aid in helping me get everything glued up since these pieces are so small. The next thing that I have to do is the chimney, which is going to be
2 inches thick.
This is basically doubled. Everything is doubled in size, and I don't have any
2-inch thick
material, so I found some 1/2-inch plywood that we're going to laminate. And I am not sure, once I glue everything up, I'm not sure how strong this is going to be. Probably not strong enough, but I am going to worry about strength at a later date. it's the next day, and it's amazing how when you give yourself a little bit of space and time, solutions just magically come to you. So I got the chimney cut, and that is gonna go right here. I plan on cutting an angle here on the chimney for the roof, and this bottom piece originally was going to butt up against the chimney, but if I make the bottom piece longer, like so, it is not the same thickness as the chimney. So all I gotta do is go in and cut a slot on the chimney, and then this will all start to hold together and add a little bit of strength. Now all coming together. For the chimney, I just learned a super cool technique in Fusion. You can take a photo of an object, convert it to black and white, and then use those brightness values to emboss or deboss the surface. So I took 2 photos of the brick accent wall outside my shop, combined them into one, flipped it horizontally in Photoshop, and then converted it to black and white. And here's how that works. Anything black subtracts from the surface in Fusion, and anything white extrudes, and all the gray tones in between create variance. To make the mortar lines more defined, I drew solid black lines over them. I also reduced the contrast a bit and added some blur to soften the dynamics. Once the image was ready, I imported it into Fusion, laid it over the chimney that I had drawn, and let the software do its thing. I then printed everything out on my Bamboo Lab H2D, and the pieces will be used to veneer the plywood chimney. The first time I tried this, it blew my mind. It works so incredibly well and is such a satisfying technique. I did experiment with painting different brick colors, but in the end, I decided to stick with shades of gray. There's going to be enough pop of color when we add the photo. Speaking of adding a photo, I wanted to use a nature shot that I took earlier this year on a family trip to Yellowstone. I only brought my phone and a vintage film camera. Since getting my first professional digital camera 20 years ago, this is the first time I went on vacation without taking one of my fancy digital cameras. It was an exercise in being present, enjoying the view through my own eyes instead of through a lens. And I only took 2 rolls of film to limit my choices. So while we're out here in Yellowstone, I'd like to tell you about today's sponsor, and that is Squarespace. I've been using Squarespace for a long time, over 11 years now, way before they were a sponsor, and I used to make websites for a living every day, full time. And I'm so glad that I don't have to do that anymore, and I don't have to worry about code, cloud, backend, none of that. And these days, setting up a new site is insanely easy. Squarespace is gonna ask you a few questions. You're gonna answer those questions. Squarespace is gonna go ahead and populate your website for you. That way, your site is already navigatable and you can go and you can look at all the pages. Then you can go and replace those photos and text with your photos and text. It has never been easier. It has never been quicker to set up a new site. Their award-winning templates are absolutely beautiful. I'm using one of their default templates for my website. And don't think that because you're using a default template that your site is gonna look like everybody else's. You can rearrange things with ease. Everything is just drag and drop and copying and pasting. It is that easy. If you need special features like a password protected site or a calendar where people can book time with you, Squarespace has got you covered. If you're like me, you can sell both digital and physical items. And with the Squarespace app, you can take your phone out into the public and sell things in person. At craft shows, one-on-one, whatever. Squarespace has got you covered. It has always been easy to set up a website on Squarespace, but it has never been easier. Now is the time. So visit squarespace.com, and when you're ready to launch, visit squarespace.com/makesomething to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. Thank you, Squarespace, for allowing me to take this trip to Yellowstone to take the photo just for this project. Crazy, I know. All right, let's get back to this. Daniel, what is this called?
It's a beer sign.
Let's get back to the beer sign. I'm kind of a film camera nerd, and part of the fun for me is developing the negatives myself. If you're curious, I do have a step-by-step video on how to develop your own film. After developing, I scanned the negative into my computer, and since it's going to be backlit, I bumped up the contrast and saturation to really make it pop. Now we're down to the final details, and honestly, this is the part I don't have much of a plan for, so I'm just winging it. I needed to make a lip on the inside for the panels to rest on, which I cut from thin walnut plywood and glued into place. The decorative walnut pillars I cut earlier got trimmed to size, then glued and nailed in. On the back side, I routed a channel for the electronics, and I figured this was a good time to add finish before final assembly. For the lighting, I first tried to make a full backlit LED panel, but it was way too bright and generated too much heat. What actually worked best was lining the border with LEDs facing inward. It used fewer lights, required less soldering, and looked perfect. The back panels needed a place to screw in, so I added some corner blocks that also reinforced the edges. For the panels themselves, I glued reflective poster board to 1/8 inch plywood and then cut them out on the laser. The reflective backing helps even out the light, and I also added perforations for ventilation. By the way, this is what happens when your air assist falls out of the back of your laser, which is exactly why you should never leave a laser unattended. Luckily, the burn marks washed right off. All the chimney pieces were glued into place, and I had already cut the front panels from white acrylic. What I didn't know yet was how they'd be attached, so I decided I'm going to sandwich a printed photo between the white acrylic and a black acrylic border. To make that possible, I cut hexagons into the corners of the white acrylic, glued in tiny nuts into place, and permanently glued the panels down. That way the black border can be screwed on to hold in the photo. I also really love how the stainless steel screws add a decorative touch. Before we wrap this up, I need to thank my top Patreon supporters this month: X2 Crafted Chaos, welcome aboard; Jonathan Ransom, Jim from Wiserbeast, Ron from Gnomeworks, Jason Ramos, Tom, Jeremy Johnstone, and Andy from P10 Workshop. I only got 2 slots left in this top tier, so thank you so much for all of your support. And the last one, oh my gosh, I'm getting ready to turn it on. Oh, that looks so freaking good. Oh my goodness. Oh, I love that so freaking much. Are you kidding me right now? I am blown away. I am insanely thrilled on how well these came out. Actually made 2 of them. It turns out the more contrast that you have in the photo, the better. So I think I'm going to reprint this with a little bit brighter brights and a little bit darker darks. I also got a little bit of light leak coming out of the edge here that I need to fix. But I am so incredibly happy. One is going to go into our rental, and then the other one is going to go in my upcoming art show next year. We'll talk more about that as we get closer to the date. It's really hard to film. It looks way better in person than it does on camera because it's hard to expose for the light coming through as well as like seeing all the wood. So you just have to trust me that it looks absolutely amazing in person. I am going to unplug these and talk about safety here for a second. The first power cable that I bought was not UL listed. It gets warm, and if I am going to be hanging these up in the rental or selling it in an art show, I don't want to put anybody in danger. So you want to make sure you get a UL listed power cable. Plus, if you get one like this, this has built-in surge protection, built-in heat protection, and is just looking for things going wrong where this doesn't. Safety is very important. I also use liquid electrical tape over all my solder joints to make sure they don't come loose and they're completely covered up. And by the way, I've got new merch. There is a new hat, and then I have new Make Something stickers available in my store. I originally started printing out the photos on this light film, which is made for inkjet printers and is made to be backlit. But I found it allowed too much light to come through, and it just works better when you print on normal photo paper. All right, that is gonna wrap it up. We'll see you soon. As always, be safe, have fun, stay passionate, and make something. I also got this cool on and off switch that goes right in line with the power cable, and it's touch on off and touch and hold to dim. Pretty cool.